Hello and welcome. In this training video, we'll cover the basic workflow of a service-only program, from searching for an existing client record to creating a new client record and recording services. The software that was selected by our continuum of care for use as our HMIS is called ClientTrack. Our HMIS is a web-based application and therefore requires internet access. After training, you'll receive the URL for the production site. You will also receive your user ID and temporary password. Now, when you log into ClientTrack for the first time, you'll be required to create a new password. It's important to remember that passwords must contain at least 8 characters, with at least one of those being a capital letter and one of those being a special character. Okay. So I have logged in to our HMIS, our version of ClientTrack, and I am on the dashboard here. Now, for the service-only programs, we'll follow a specific workflow. So in this particular training, we're going to cover searching for an existing client record, creating a new client record, adding additional household members, and then applying a service or recording a service. So let's start with searching for a client record. It's important to remember that we must always search in the system for a client before creating a new client record. Many of our clients have received services across the continuum of care and do have client records. So if we do not search and we just create a new client record, what we're doing is creating a potential issue by having duplicate client records. So again, it's important to remember to always search for a client before entering any information in or creating a new client record to see if they have an existing record. And I'm going to do that by clicking up here on the client's workspace and then find client. And the best way to search for an existing client record is to start with the client's first and last name. In this example, I'm going to start with the last name, test 1, and I'm just going to search by the last name. And you'll see here that I have 4 clients that are in the system with the last name of test 1. Now, if I would have typed in, let's say, Ronnie, test 1, and done a search, it would have narrowed it down to the 2 records that have Ronnie as the first name and test 1 as the last name. Now you can see here I have 2 records. I have Ronnie test 1 and then Ronnie test 1 junior. If I was working with a client, I could verify social and date of birth and then select the appropriate record based on that. So if I click on, let's say, Ronnie test 1, and I verify that my client's last 4 of the social is 6789 and this January 1st, 1968 is their date of birth, I can click on this and it will open up the client record. And then from here, I could move forward and add services. But let's go back here to find client. And I'm going to go back to test 1 as the last name. And let's say that my client's name is Bill test 1. Well, I can see here by the last name that there is no Bill or William. So I can type in the first name just to make sure. Nothing. Let's go with William. Nothing. Okay. So I know that this client is not in the system. So the next step, once I've searched and cannot find an existing client record for the client that I'm working with, is to create a new client record. And we do that right over here on the left-hand side under Add New Client. I'm going to type in Bill. He goes by Bill and not William. Test 1, social, date of birth, and then I'm going to come down here and click on Next in the lower right corner. That's going to bring me to client information form. This information contains on it what we call universal data elements. And you'll notice that some of these data elements have red asterisks by them. Those indicate that those are required fields. So if you do not select something for the fields with the red asterisk, you will not be able to proceed to the next form. So I am going to go here, and we're going to start here. We've got the date of birth. We have the full date of birth. So I'm going to select that. And this is just a test client. I'm not going to add anything in here, but you would definitely want to add contact information for the client if you have it. And the last field here on this form is relationship to head of household. If you're working with one adult, somebody that's come in by themselves, then they will always be self here because they are the head of household. And you'll see as we add additional family members that we would use the other responses here. But for this instance, we're going to stick with self. And then click on Next and Finish. So what we've done here is created a new client record for Bill Test 1. And you'll see here the client ID number. So the system, when you create new client records, the system will sequentially assign clients a client ID number. And so I can tell by looking at this number that currently we have 152,403 records, client records in our system. This client ID number is very useful. I would recommend that you record this. For example, if you keep a file, a paper file on a client, you may want to jot this client ID number down in that paper file. This is the best way to communicate with other caseworkers in your organization regarding this client. If you're going to email back and forth or use Teams or a messaging system internally, it's best to use this client ID number. Do not ever use identifiable information like name, social security number, date of birth when you're sending an email to somebody about a client or messaging them in Teams. You just don't want to do that. That's a huge no-no. So again, the best way is to use this client ID number because a client record can be found and pulled by this client ID number. For example, let me go back here to find client. I'm going to come down here to client ID and put that record number in there. And you can see it took me right back to Bill Test 1's client record. So this client ID number is the best way to get into a client's record once you have it created. Okay, so we talked about searching for a client record, and we created a new client record. And now let's talk about what do we do if this client comes in and has more than just themselves in the household or as a family. Maybe they come in with somebody else together and they're going to be receiving services together. So we need to record that other individual's information. So right at the top of this screen here, this expand button, if we click that, it's going to open up this quick add family member screen. And if we click on quick add family member, it's going to take us here to a search screen. And it's assuming that we're looking for the same last name. That will not always be the case. Very often we can have individuals receiving services as a family with different last names. So it's important to remember that. And if that were the case, we would change this last name here. Click on next. It come back and said, please review the list below for potential duplicates, because based on this last name, there are other clients in here. If none of these records are the individual that we are looking for, we can just click on next, and it'll take us to the next screen, and then we can put in the client's record. So we're going to add Susie. Put in her social. And then date of birth. And date of birth, data quality, we got the full date of birth, so we're going to select that. And it's going to select some race, ethnicity, and gender status. Do no, this is a female, so I am going to answer the pregnancy question. If you selected man, that pregnancy question goes away. When you select woman, it will appear woman, girl, if child. Again, contact information, very important if you have it. And here we get to this relationship to head of household. So Susie came in with Bill. Bill is the head of household in this instance. So Susie is going to be, let's make her just a friend. Let's do cohabitant. Okay, and then next. And then finish. And now we have Susie's client record again, and here's her client ID. Now if I go back into this box here with the expand, you'll now see that we have the family here. We have Bill as the self-proclaimed head of household, and then Susie as the cohabitant. The next thing that we are going to look at here is recording services. So on this family screen here, we can toggle back and forth between client records. So currently you'll see that we are in Susie's record. So if I click on Bill here, it will take me to Bill's record. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is record a service. Now, this workflow is very specific and is geared towards individual or programs who are strictly just providing services and not doing program enrollments. The workflow is different for programs or projects that are doing enrollments, and so there will be a separate training video for those types of programs. But the workflow for service only is what we're covering in this particular training. So what we have left to do is to record service in this client record. So we're still in the client workspace. We're going to come down here to enrollment and services. We're going to click on that, and then we're going to come down here to services. And you'll see that there's nothing that shows here. That's because, if you remember, we created this as a new client record. So there is no history in this client record. Had we accessed a record that was already existing in the system, we would most likely see a history here of services that the client had received in the past, as long as they've been in the system. But because this is a new client record, we don't have any services to show. We are going to record a new service by clicking on Add New. And on this screen, you'll see that it's going to say, yep, you've got 2 family members. We're not going to worry about this, so we're not doing an enrollment. We're going to select our grant from the dropdown. This grant will be different depending on your program. So each program can have and often will have different grants listed here. So your organization will most likely have something other than this agency grant general that is listed here. And that information will be provided to you after you've completed training so that you know which grant to use. Also, the services listed are based on the grant that is selected. So in this case, this agency grant general, the service that is assigned to that grant or associated with that grant for this organization is just case management. It's very rare that you're going to find that this service dropdown only has one service in it, but for training purposes, that's how this particular organization was set up. Most service dropdowns will have many services listed to choose from. And again, those services are decided by your organization, your program, and provided to us in a document, and we will add those to this service dropdown. So I have selected case management, providing case management to Bill, and this has put in today's date. That's fine. If for some reason I happened to do this yesterday, but didn't have time at the end of the day to go back and enter it, I can put in yesterday's date. But I recommend that you really try to enter your client data in, number one, real time, which means while you're sitting with the client. If you cannot do that, and you're capturing this information on a paper document to add into the system later, I recommend that you make time at the end of the day to go in and enter all of that client data. And the reason for that is this information goes out system-wide, and so Bill may have come into your organization today for a service, and he may walk down the street to another organization and apply for service as well. If you do not have your organization's information in here in regards to the services that you provided, the other organizations that Bill could potentially walk into will not be able to see what you have provided, what services you've provided, until you enter that information. So getting the information in the system as quickly as possible really helps to cut down on duplicate services. So again, I just highly recommend that you get this information into the system as soon as you can. The units of measure, units, and unit value are all things that can be changed based on how your program wants to use this information. Right? It's set up default right now as count units and unit value, and so that's how we're going to leave it. But if your organization decides that they want to do like hours, and maybe 1 hour is 1 unit and the value for 1 hour is $50. You can see now that when I save this, it's going to record that we had 1 unit of case management, which was valued at $50. But again, that's all up to your organization to decide how this is going to be used. And then at the bottom here, there's a comments section. This is just a great underutilized field, right? So if you have any notes, any comments to be made about maybe you were meeting with Bill for case management and something was mentioned, or there was just an occurrence that you think is important to record, just put it in there, right? Because it will show up. And remember, anything that you put into the system is there and you can get it out of the system. So, all right, so we've recorded this service for Bill. And then I'm going to go down here to the lower right corner and click on Save. And now we see under Bill's record that he has a service here, case management. Now, if you remember, we had another household member or another family member, and that was Susie. So I'm going to go into Susie's record. We do the same thing over here in enrollment and services, and then services. And I'm going to go here to add new. And I'm going to select the same thing. Again, the grant and the service. Today's date. I'm not going to change these. I know in the last one I changed this to 1. All right, we'll just do that. I don't really have any comments to leave under Susie's record. So I'm going to click on the lower right-hand corner on the Save button. And now Susie has a record as well. So, and this would be, if they came in together for case management, then I would record this service on both. If only one came in, let's say Bill was the only one that came in for case management today, Susie did not, then obviously I would not record this case management service on Susie's record, only on Bill's record. And had I done that, had I added this and I didn't intend to, there's always a way to fix that. So. Okay. So thank you for taking the time to watch this training video. For additional training and resources, please contact your HMIS support team. And as I mentioned, you will receive program-specific information that you will use in this workflow after your training is complete. Thank you.